Hello, everybody. My name is Jay, and welcome to Low Code, where code is optional, but results are not. And today, you're going to be learning how to use Spark's tabs in your applications. So I actually don't have it pulled up yet, but let me actually go ahead and pull up Spark One, and we're going to be learning how to set up tabs so that you can show different cards or information based on what a user has selected. So for this, just so you know, I will be using my template, which is based off of Spark Core, which is what Spark 1 is built off of. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to have to build one anyway for this application that I'm building. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to kill two birds with one stone. So before we begin, if you found this video helpful, do me a solid and like this video, comment on what you'd like to see more of, and subscribe to this channel for more content. It really is appreciated. So I guess we can first sort of just look over the structure for tabs here in Spark Core. So if you want to learn anything of how something is built and the components like it basically is comprised of for Spark One, you can come and find Spark Core. Just go to the homepage of Spark One and you can find this link here for Spark Core. And here you can actually see the setup and how everything is being used and all its attributes and such like that that makes up Spark One. So here on the tabs page, we can see the structure of the tabs component that is used here in Spark One. We can see that we have a sc-tabs-root, and then inside of that, we have two things. We have the sc list, and then we have, sorry, the sc tabs list, and then we have the sc tabs content. They are at the same level. And then inside the list, we have a sc tabs trigger, and inside that trigger, we have the SC button. But also at the same level as the SC trigger, we have the SC tabs indicator. Now, I've never used this, but it's there. So my components, which are built on top of Spark Core, just have some of these things kind of pre-configured because I didn't want to have literally a component for each one of these when a lot of the times in an application, they're going to kind of look the same. So I kind of put them together in that sense. So what I'll do here, I'll come and search for UI underscore tabs. And with my boilerplate, I left some notes and some components kind of telling you what it is that it wants to use. So we can see that here, when I added the tabs, it's saying to insert the tabs trigger component as well as the tabs content component. This lets me know that there are two components that I created that I should use here to actually make it function. Because if you don't have everything that Spark 1 or Spark Core needs to function, it just won't function. So this is telling me that I have two components, one for the trigger and one for the content. So inside this tabs, I can do tabs trigger, and we can see that we find that like so. And then we can do tabs content, and we can see that I have both of those. And now we're getting these errors here because I actually named the slots for both of these. So we'll see that if I go to the trigger and we go to attributes and we go to slot, this one has to be set to trigger. And you see that message disappears. And then in the content, we're gonna do the same thing, but set it to content. And I can see here in the trigger, it's telling me to insert a value. So I'll open these. We can kind of go over how I've kind of pre-configured them. So we can see here in my topmost level component, the UI tabs, we can see here that I already have the root as well as the list. And then we have a slot here. This is the trigger slot. So this is where we're going to pass every trigger. And then underneath that, we have the component. Now you might be asking, well, what does this unmanaged and what does this unmanaged and this asterisk mean in these slots? These are just notes for me to know that one, the asterisk means that it is required, as you typically might find like on a form. So the asterisk is just letting me know that this component is required for this to work. And then unmanaged means that there's something specifically needed for this to work, and I can't just toss something in there. So that is letting me know that I just can't pass whatever into there, that there is something needed that I need to have set to the slot. Now, if it's managed, that means that I can pass whatever I want in there. I'm not sure what of my components has that. Can't really think of one at the top of my head. but some of my components has that to where it's already managed to where I can literally just toss in whatever I want and it'll work because it's already pre-configured. Okay, so let's get back the tabs trigger again. And we're going to set that to the trigger. And now there's a few ways that you can go about this. Let's see here. How do we want to go about this? Why don't we I'll have two variables, and this one I will signifier. I don't know a good word with it to kind of say that this is a constant and won't change. And we'll say something like options, right? And in options, I want to have an array of, let's say, I think for this component, I'm going to have a create organization. Oh, that's not how you spell that. Create organization, as well as a join organization, like so. And then we could have another component called like selected option, something like that. And I will just set that to, let's say, that first one. So I could just type it in, sorry. So create organization, like that. So there's a couple things to note here on how you can use the tabs component here. We can see here that in the documentation, we have a few options. We have, I'm just going to go over the main ones that I deal with in most components, and that's going to be default value, value, and then on value change. Those are the main things that I mainly deal with in applications. So for default value, this says the initial active tab when rendered, use when you don't need to control the active tab state, right? So this is just going to be a simple tab. You can use default value here instead of the regular value. Reason being is that, as it says here, the regular value must be used in conjunction with on value change. So that means that you are now in control of the different states of the tab. So I can show a quick example of this. Let's go into here. I'll remove this. Sorry, that was for testing. I'll go into here, and what we'll do, let's first set up our triggers. So I'll set these triggers to repeat based on options. And then inside of them, I'll just have a text. And then for the formula of that text, I'll just set it to the item so that one says create and one says join. And then for content, we're going to repeat the same thing on options. Now, this is the important part, is that your triggers and your content has to have a specific value so that it can track what's being showed. So if we actually go back to trigger really quickly, sorry, here in value, I want to set this to the item like so. And then the same thing with the tab's content is I want the value to be set to the item. So now things are going to be synced, right? So now in here, we can have a paragraph and, or sorry, I'll just use a regular text here. We don't need to complicate things. Oh, I'm pressing all the wrong buttons. We don't need to complicate things, but we can get a text and I will just concatenate now displaying, and then we'll just get the item like so. So now we can see that right now nothing is showing, but if I click on things, then you can see that it is now switching between create and join, right? So if we want something to show by default, all we have to do is come to UI component and we can set this default value. I'll just do it to options and 0, and that'll be the create organization. So now you'll see right now, selected option is not in use, but we are still able to switch. And let me just refresh really quickly just to show that create organization is displaying first by default. As you can see there, create organization is not displaying first, and we can switch between them, right? So this is if we don't need to control the state ourselves. It depends on what you're going for, right? So now we can also control this ourselves if we now set the value. So if we use the regular value, we'll say options 0 again. Now, when we try to click between them, you'll see now it's not working. Why? Because like it says in the documentation, it says that if you use the value, it must be used in conjunction with on value change so that those values can be updated when you switch between the two. So back here in my UI tabs, I'll go to events. Here's that on value change event. And here I can say selected option is now going to equal the new value that gets passed. And I just want to make sure really quickly that the value of, yeah, that the value attribute is set to selected option. All right. So now let's refresh really quickly. And now we can see that if I try this again now it is again working. Now you can use this to show different components, I guess you can say. So for example, I don't think I have any components, but let's create two test components here. We'll say create test or something like that. And I'll just do a paragraph in here and not a table. I want a text. And we'll just say showing create. Right. Then I'm just going to duplicate this and call it join test. And we'll say showing join. So then what we can do is back in the onboarding here and back in the content, what we could do is that we could set this attribute for this value to selected value. Now, this is going to break things because now you can see that it's showing both of them at one time, right? And I can actually remove this, repeat. And then if we come in here, instead of using the item, I can use selected organize or selected option, sorry. Now we can see that if we press between them, that it still works, right? But now we're not repeating content. And now there's a reason that we're doing this because now we're going to actually use this to showcase or to show components instead of changing what the text is. So I can get rid of this. I can come in here and get my two test components. So I can get the create test as well as the join test. And now I can just show and hide these based on the selected option. So if we go here into the create, I want to do show and hide, and I want that to be a selected option equals create organization. And then do the same thing for the join. And then we can show and hide this if selected option. I could just, oh, shoot. Selected option equals, and it's going to be join organization. So now you can see that as we swap through these are now showing different components. Also, just one more quick note here. If you want to showcase completely different things when these tabs switch, you can have these different UI tab content. You just have to change the value, right? So here I can say options 0. I want to show this one. And do I have any components I can showcase really quickly? I guess we could showcase a different cards or something like that. So for this one, I'll just get a card and we'll just set this one to red. Right, then I'll duplicate this and I will set this one to 1 like so. And we'll set this one to be, let's go with the blue or purple. All right, so now you see, now that when we switch them, it's showing completely different content if you want to do that. So yeah. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you can use tabs with Spark Core. So if this was helpful at all, do me a solid and like this video, comment on what you'd like to see more of, and subscribe for more content. It is appreciated. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time. Happy building.